Guys, I wanted to share out this interview right here. This is actually an interview between us, Luke and myself, and Andrew Witts, who's the gameplay director of Marathon. We collected questions right there in stream, questions that involve seasonal wipes, loot progression, lobby size, you name it. Now, we'll say we only had a 30-minute block here, so we didn't get to ask every question, but this was our interview with Andrew. Enjoy. Hello, how's it going?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good. I know you guys have had an exciting day today, and we've been collecting questions. So thank you so much for taking time to join us right here. And we've got a ton of things we want to ask you, and hopefully we can get through all of them in the next 30 minutes.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds great.
Well, we can go ahead and start diving in. We do have a list of things that we wanted to talk to you about. And I think the first question we want to ask you is in regards to the 18 players per map. And a question I have on that is, y'all mentioned that changes depending on the map, correct? Or is it always 18?
Each map has a different size and intentionality behind it. So the maps that Dire Marsh, which I think is like the one that is being showcased everywhere, that one is 18 players, so it's 6 crews of 3. And so that one is one of our bigger maps. We also have another map as well that's a similar size. But yeah, we're pretty much looking at each map, what the intention is, what the kind of combat pacing is, and then what's the right player count for that zone.
Gotcha. And do y'all have any plans of either upping that count or even lowering that count? Is that something that's still up in the air?
We're still looking. We're always looking at different mutators and stuff like that for what would be a really good experience. And so right now we're feeling pretty good about that being the max crew to kind of still give that overall pace of being able to loot and take on feel the resistance of the UESC, and also just pace player interactions a bit. Because if it's just a rumble fest in the beginning, right, or too often, right, then and it kind of feels the crescendo, the climax of the map is actually the beginning, not the middle, and tension kind of can feel it goes up it expires a little too early. And so we're trying to get that good happy medium of right player count, overall amount of density of AI enemies or combatants in the world. Also, we're having hazards, things that you have to kind of deal with, like weather. Weather has lightning that can strike the environment or players. There's a bunch of hazardous plants and things around. So yeah, these are all the kind of things that made the ingredients of the overall survival table stakes. And so that player count is the other vector in terms of what feels like too much.
So when you talk about throughout a match having that crescendo at different points, does that mean that this is going to be persistent zones where players will load in over time to kind of meet that player count? Or is everyone going to load in at the start?
Everyone loads in at the start. What I mean by the crescendo part is that the start of a session is kind of we want to kind of set the tension of the world, because ultimately there's this game of who's moving where, are they making noise, are they picking fights, are they being irresponsible to their time, where are they kind of prioritizing what activity that spawns in the map that's going to take up their time and what they want to go after. The lean into the survival genre a bit with the sandbox is that things have a cost, and so you have to kind of meter that cost a lot. And so we're very careful about initial spawns of players and where they're at, so that as a team makes choices, there's not it's immediately punished because there's a crew that spawns right next to you, so to speak, right? And so we're really trying to make sure that overall feeling of as crews move, there's this nervousness and paranoia of where the other crews are at, but they're not always on top of you in the first 2 minutes.
Gotcha.
Okay. That actually leads us to our next question. How variable is the weather here? Is it one of those things all right, yeah, you've got some fog when you load into this map, or is it you can actually have weather that changes mid-match?
Yeah, the weather can change over the course of time. So there could be usually we try and pick one something a little bit consistent. So if you have a heavily stormy map in the beginning, it's gonna be stormy throughout. We don't want to have too much dynamism where you feel you're constantly looking up at the sky of what's going to happen too much, right? Sure. We definitely want to keep you focused in the experience, but it could be, fog can roll into the map and it can get really really cloudy, really really murky a bit over the course of a session. So that's something we've been looking at, but we're always trying to dial in just the right amount of dynamism, right? For what can happen. The rain, there's definitely different amounts and densities of rain. So there could be light, there could be heavy. When it's really heavy, it's hard to get that situational awareness of hearing beyond beyond like the building that you're in, and so you might lose some approaches, so that definitely brings some tension. Lightning does communicate to where it's going to strike a little bit before, but if you're not paying attention, it can totally happen, and it definitely EMPs your systems. Can't use abilities for a while, so
there's going to be consequences to something like getting struck by lightning and being in the vicinity.
Absolutely, yeah. We're trying to make sure that you're always on your toes, but that if you kind of stay on point, you kind of can avoid those things. We don't want something where if you're taking too long inside of a loot container and you're not paying attention to where lightning might strike, that could definitely be bad for you. But it's not going to like insta kill you or anything like that. We try and make it so that you're paying a longer penalty of being EMP'd, which gives you a status effect where you can't use your abilities for a bit, and then afterwards is a lingering status effect where that has additional costs. So like being poisoned, for example, sure, you take damage over time, but then when that completes, there's a lingering status effect where all your healing items take like twice as long to use, and so if you pick a fight when you have that, you're in deep trouble.
That's actually a great point. So one of the string questions from the community is about the negative status effects. Is there going to be situations where can you like say burn out? I'm thinking of like the old days of like getting 2-tapped by Thorn, running around the corner and then just burning out and dying. Is there going to be something of that level of lethality in regards to status effects, or even like stasis slowing you and locking you to a place?
We're trying to get some reaction time in there, right? Just because the overall pace, and also like letting people the opportunity to use consumables. We definitely don't want something where it's just like, oh, I don't even have time to use a thing, because that's part of the survival game, right? And rewarding the loot. Like if you're bringing in things that are really good for resisting or cleansing status effects, you need an opportunity to use that, right? Otherwise, like it just kind of happens to you and there's nothing you can really do about it. And so that's where we're kind of really considering. So like when you're poisoned, if you don't treat it or you're staying in like a chem grenade, it's going to re-tick and it's going to be really bad for you, because chem grenades, for example, like essentially our version of poison or tox, it basically ticks down only your health pool. It bypasses your shield, so you can die with shields. We had it using shields before, and what we found was that it kind of felt the same as if somebody was like shooting you, a little bit or something, and it didn't give you that urgency.
Sure.
And so that's where we really were like, you know what, it's not pushing us into the survival game enough, but we don't want the survival game to be so debilitating where if you don't have a consumable, you're just kind of like dunzo, right? And so we're trying to have that medium where, let's say you get poisoned, you're going to be poisoned for X amount of seconds and you're going to be really hurting, like your health pool is going to be low. But at that point in time, you're going to hopefully not pick a fight and rat around a little bit until you get either a mechanics kit, which is the thing that kind of cleanses that, or there's a certain patch kit that's called like a panacea kit that both heals you to full, cleanses all of your status effects, and so it does both of those.
Gotcha. Okay. I actually kind of like that because it pushes you to lean into the consumables, and I'm down with that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, kind of on the subject of like those negative consequences, time limit. When you reach that like 0 time you have to extract, is that something where you're just insta-killed and the entire map gets wiped? Or is that something that's just you're going to be applied a negative debuff that you have to extract over a certain limited time, or then you're actually going to be done so?
Oh, I love this question because we just made this change for alpha that we're feeling pretty good about. Hopefully where it's going to land as well as we think it is. So we used to have kind of what you were saying where the timer reaches 0 and then everyone just kind of dies, and it's essentially like a wipe, like the server kind of spins down, and it resulted in moments that were like basically like dead man walking moments, right? Where you're like, well, someone picked a fight with me and now it's like 15 seconds left, and now like we're all just gonna go,
There's
right?
nothing gonna happen.
Yeah, and it ended up being moments where like you activate the exfil at like 10 seconds, but like it takes X amount of time for the exfil to spin up, right? So even though you're essentially maybe you could be the only person left on the map and you have a lot of gear, the exfil is not going to turn on in time, and we're like kind of thinking, do we have a dynamic exfil timer that like shortcuts? Do we just do all these things? And so what we have in the alpha is we recontextualize kind of what the timer is, and so the timer is essentially how long you can be on planet until the UESC kind of traces your location, because ultimately, right, you're committing kind of like space crimes for like being on this planet, because it's like it's restricted access, right? So you're trespassing. And so we recontextualize it so that at 00 or at 2 minutes we send you a warning that the UESC is kind of like taking notice of you, and then at 00 they have like essentially traced your location. You have 2 minutes to get out, and before they sever your connection, like they basically sever the connection on your body, right, as a sideboard. And so you have 2 minutes, and there's one last train out of town. That where the exfil is located is a bit random on the map, but like no one can activate it early. It launches at the last last second of the 2 minutes.
Interesting. So you got to
So
get to it. And
You
it's
get-
like,
Yeah.
You got to fight to stay alive if there's other teams extracting in that same spot too.
Yeah, and so in addition, what we did was the combatants, actually, the UESC combatants are extremely sensitive. They essentially get essentially amplified hearing to a degree, and so they really notice you. And so the UESC are even more hostile to you and take notice of you even more, because that's taking advantage of the tracing of your location. And so the final exfil should feel like your last option. If it's your first option, then essentially it's bonus time. And so we wanted to feel like it's the riskiest train to get out of town, both because the other players that could still be in the map and also because the AI is gonna be more ruthless. So that's where we wanted to really feel like it's really exhilarating when the UESC are hailing bullets down on everybody who's trying to get on the last train. And you also get these moments where the two squads may fight at first, and then you actually have whoever's left alive that's not down jumps in together and take the same train because they don't want to dumpster all of it. And so it gets all those kind of stories. The whole purpose of this genre really is to create survival stories, right?
Sure.
That happen across different players. And so that's why we're making the choices we are.
I like that. So you may actually create a temporary alliance just to get out and save your loot.
Yep.
I love it. I love it. Are there any plans for PvE modes or other interpretations of Marathon to launch alongside y'all's extraction here?
There's none. We're not doing that right now. Right now, we're just kind of spending all the time we have on kind of the baseline experience, which is and give it a little bit of clarity, the baseline experience of Marathon and why PvE is in the game. Because I think it's a fair kind of question sometimes that we kind of get is it's a PvP game ultimately, right? It's PvP, extraction shooters, PvP.
Right.
But why is there PvE in the game, right? And the analogy that I've kind of used in the team since I joined is extraction games are kind of a bunch of people go into a dragon's treasure stash, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, everyone could fight over it, and then whoever's left alive keeps the stash, right? But you're kind of forgetting about the dragon, and the dragons want to keep all of the stash, right? All of the treasure in its where it guards, right? And the UESC and the rest of our combatants are essentially that. They're the table stakes. They're the dragon guarding the treasure hoard. What that results in is that we actually have a lot of activities and POIs and stuff that are very much PvE challenges. Our units are meant to be as challenging, challenging baseline stakes as players. There's different units that are more difficult. So there's commanders that have harsher and more over the top abilities versus the baseline recruit that has a sidearm but can be pretty nimble and rush you down. And so even though we're not doing bespoke modes, we are investing a lot of time into making sure we have a rich PvE challenge as well as the PvP. And that's all three of those pieces are you, your crew, the combatants in the world, and the table stakes of the world, and then other crews. That's the recipe for our storytelling engine that we think is really important versus everything is strictly a PvP challenge.
Gotcha. Andrew, I actually played I played the build back in August of last year. I want to say it was August. And one thing
that's a long time ago.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed was how difficult the enemy AI was. And it was funny because y'all actually were this is it toned down. I guess y'all had nerfed it. And I already felt like I was getting messed up. But as far as enemy AI goes, is that going to be dependent on the map or is it random every time?
The layout of the map, there's some setups that are randomized, but they're learnable in terms of you're going to go to a POI in Dire Marsh, Greenhouse is a POI, and you'll be okay, is the Ghost commander here? The Ghost is a unit that can go invisible, that has submachine gun weapons, and the commander can not only go invisible, but also launch clones of itself, invisible clones of itself, to challenge which one you have to target. And so sometimes there's a Ghost commander in there, or sometimes there's a commander sniper on the roof, and that one essentially really punishes your approach if you're not too careful and you don't avoid its view on the approach. And that one can launch essentially a chemical grenade ability at you with pinpoint accuracy and poison you and stuff like that. So we're trying to make sure that the challenge is consistent, but there's a little bit more dynamism in your approach. And so there's a big baddie somewhere and you're accounting for that, but which one you aren't entirely sure. So but we have a bunch of units that go up in difficulty, and we have the intention where some maps are going to be more difficult in certain ways, right? We have one map that's way more about longer sight lines. We have another map that's more porous. And so in the porous map, Marsh is one where you have to be careful about snipers as well as going in tunnels panels where there might be an assault unit with a shield and a shield bash. And so we're trying to make sure that that tension is always the forefront, but there's a bit more a gradient in our ingredients of our setups and where they're at and the composition of the squads that patrol the maps.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it sounds real dangerous. You guys mentioned in the Vidoc that there's going to be a lot of death. We should expect to die a lot. What kind of insurance are our players going to have? Like, so if you do die, is there any loot that you can keep?
We don't have insurance directly or like a safety box and stuff like that. We basically, there's not a lot of loot that you can keep. We have a bunch of loot that actually doesn't require you to exfil or other ways of sharing kind of the benefit. So we have data cards. Data cards are kind of like, imagine you find like a colonist old credit card and you like swipe it to your credit card machine and instantly gain like $800 or whatever amongst your crew. It's like you're maxing out a leftover credit card or something. And so that instantly goes up and gives money directly to every single player's account. Not actual real life account, but their Spacebucks account, their space account. And so there's loot types like that. And then also materials, like really high value materials, like purple tier materials, they are duplicated on a successful exfil. So let's say we're all in a crew together and I go down and then the two of you both each have like a purple material. I actually get that in my vault, even if I died. And that should give me both a progression opportunity to upgrade some faction upgrades that are persistent upgrades that I don't lose, or I upgrade my black market, which gives me like additional purchase power so I can consistently get the guns that I expect to go into a run for a certain cost. And lastly is the sponsored kit, which is like this notion of if you're down on your luck, right? Let's say like you're low on loot in your vault or you're low on cash and stuff, factions will sponsor you with a gun. And we don't really have like terrible guns that are nerfed in damage or whatever. Damage isn't really a vector that our attachments or mods for weapons like really increase. It's all indirect damage and like perks and other things to keep things interesting. So yeah, the sponsor kits do have a weapon, ammo, a grenade, and some like a bunch of medis in there, which we're actively testing to make sure that that kit is capable of taking out players of any kind of gear like value.
Interesting. And so you mentioned how like there's almost this team play dynamic that like where you could sacrifice yourself but your teammates could extract and you can still reap some of the benefits from that if they've got like a specific material that like progresses you as well.
Yeah, so anything that is like purple rarity or above is shared. And so like if you find a payday, just one of you needs to have it in your inventory when you get out. So you see sometimes where someone's like, all right, I'm gonna drop this thing because it's too valuable. You guys get out and I'll stick around and I'll hold them here, right? There's been a few stories like that where that's happened. We've definitely seen people like who are about to exfil and they might get hit with the glitch's arm cannon, which knocks you around. We've seen people like literally quickly go in their inventory, drop the material, and then like run at it so that they take all of the brunt of the knockback, and then their team picks it up, the material, right when like the exfil happens. So there's some really cool plays that are in there. But yeah, we know that the genre does have these bristly moments in terms of the lowest, the lows that can have. There's some high highs, there's some low lows, but a thing that this team is obsessed about is respecting player time and also respecting like that natural social fabric of playing with other people that you don't know.
I love that. No, that's such an interesting take. And it also means that even if you aren't that good, if you could just be a good distraction, you can aid your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the goal of the game is that everyone feels the tension of this world. We've seen people who are like super good. They play, somewhat PvP shooters and they lean forward in the same way because the game puts you in a scenario where you just kind of need to play carefully, And so we see a lot of people have success where as long as you're like playing carefully and you kind of know what's going on and you kind of like just learn the map a bit. Like in the early hours, we don't expect you to like exfil constantly or extract constantly. We have a lot of contracts that don't require you to extract to gain a lot of rewards, like a lot of faction rep, and also like the factions, when you increase their rep, they give you a ton of goodies, right? And so it's not just on your shoulders to just like go out into the mines and find your own gold and stuff like that. We really are trying to make sure that we respect time in terms of how you get faction rep and how those factions pay you out in loot, as well as the loot that you find off of players and from the AI in the world.
Love that. I love that. That's actually leads to my next question. And I wanted to ask about loot because we've seen that everything is, you can mod it up. You can add the purple and even the gold exotic style looking mods. And that adds a lot of different, or at least looks like big stat bumps. I've also seen people, I think it was Lupo that talked about, there's a rail gun that allowed his rail gun to turn into like this burst fire. I think it shoot like 2 shots instead of just 1. But is there any like one of a kind loot out there there's no base form for it? It's like a one of a kind drop.
I won't talk about it. Like, I won't say. I'll say that we love this idea on the combat team. And I'll just say that the team is cooking on these exact ideas. I think like we've talked a bit about, gold cores for runners that can really do things like getting like, turn your double jump into a triple jump, or really change like how much melee damage you do out of like stealth and all kinds of craziness that kind of comes from there, and implants and stuff. On the weapon side of things, I'll just say this. We really like the idea of there being a content type, loot type that's extremely rare, that people take notice and immediately identify in the environment. So yeah, that's something we're thinking about. I won't say we've committed to something, but we are obsessed with this idea because we think that's really cool. And we also are thinking about, we've been thinking a lot about what, Destiny has set the bar really in terms of like exotics, right? And like what really interesting guns are at the highest level, right? In terms of the combination of perks and stuff. And so on the Marathon team, we've been spending a lot of time going, what's the Marathon version of an exotic? And so we have some of these guns right now. An example is one that, we have the Magnum, and one of the gold mods for a Magnum is you can put a sniper scope in the Magnum.
Ooh.
And now you have a pocket snipe.
Ariana's Val.
So you have a pocket snipe in that is really far reaching, right? Which kind of leads to the the expectation of like throw back a little bit to the Marathon 1 in terms of like they had there's a handgun with a sniper scope on it. So we're thinking about things like that. There's a flip scope AR in the game right now that we showed a bit in the earlier trailer. We think about what is the gold mod for that gun. So every single gun, when we make the gun, we both think about what the base form of it is, what the attachments story is for it, and then what is the gold mod version of the gun. And concept team actually thinks about, like, they design the gold mod in consideration with the base model. So there's a lot of fun stuff coming out of that. So if you imagine if you see what they do with runners, imagine to see how well they cook with stuff like that.
That sounds honestly
I love that so
cool.
much. I love that so much.
One of the questions kind of that I wanted to lead off of that one with, so knowing that we're going to have like the potential for these really rare weapons and stuff, I think a lot of people are wondering, since Marathon is going to be designed around this seasonal model, are there any wipes? How does that work? Do we lose all our loot at the end of a season, and do we get like more new interesting loot the next season? Like, what's the design philosophy around that?
Yeah, and unfortunately this is the last one I'll get to, but I think it's a great one to end on. Is the yes, we will be wiping, but just the sandbox loot chase is not the only loot chase so we're basically trying to make sure that we reward people for their progress they make in a season, so that when a wipe happens, right, like there's some things to commemorate like what you've done from the previous one. So it's not like you just like go into like new user experience every season or something like that. We're really trying to reward playtime and reward what you've done in the previous season. And so and partially that's exciting because we're purposely going to change the sandbox chase. Like, we think that's an interesting space for us to delve into, so that every season folks like yourselves are thinking, wait a minute, they did this thing now? Oh no, now there's different mods in the mod pool for like this gun. Oh, they did this thing, right? And then like, how do I acquire this thing? We think that is really exciting, and not just giving the same ingredients over time. So that's a bit of how we're like thinking about seasons and wipes and stuff, is one, finding a way to reward your time all up, and two, make even the chase interesting season over season versus it's the same.
Right. And I feel like I'm assuming that's going to tie into rankings, and that will be like seasonal rankings, right?
We got a bunch of things. Yeah, like, we're thinking about stuff like that. We're thinking about like, account bound kind of like collectibles or something like that, right? And so there's a bunch of things that we're like trying to consider for this, and we'll be getting into all that stuff, on the road to launch.
Wonderful. Well, Andrew, I know you got to go. Thank you so much for doing this interview with us, and it was great to see everything today, and also great to just learn more about Marathon.
Yeah, I appreciate the two of you as well. Like, it's a big day for all of us, but I mean, the good thing about this for us is that it's the start of the dialogue with folks like yourselves and folks watching your stream. So yeah, definitely appreciate y'all taking the time, and definitely for checking out the game and stuff like that. So yeah, just greatly appreciative of the whole deal.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the alpha. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Chat, how did we feel about that? We didn't get to the anti-cheat questions. I wish we did. I knew we were going to run out of time because we only had a 30-minute window. I wanted to talk anti-cheat, dude. I wanted to talk anti-cheat so bad, but we got caught up in some of the other stuff. But I hope we hit some of that. I was kind of like going through my list. I was hoping we were going to hit some of the big ones. Seasonal wipes, though. The weapon loot is such a big deal, man. Like, that one is such a big deal. I want to be able to, like, I think one of a kind drops are so important. You need to have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, but in order to have that, it needs to be like, oh my God, I just obtained the holy grail, this unique of uniques. But at the same time, it sucks when you lose it, right? I think the questions, Luke, which ones did we didn't talk about anti-cheat.
Yeah, I didn't get to anti-cheat.
And we didn't talk about directly trading with teammates. But dude, the fact that you can still walk away with something even if you die, as long as your squad makes it out alive. If they make it out alive with the shit, then your priority is to be a team player first. I actually love that because there's so many people that will actually value their life because they have loot. They're like, you know, Les is a perfect example of this. Les will ditch me as soon as shots get fired because Les just cares about getting out alive with his stuff. But now all that matters is that, yes, you may be ditched by your teammate, but in this case, them ditching you may actually be good if they've got the good shit on them.
Yeah, like this idea that all of you can, like, just everyone being able to contribute to that one big goal instead of just each of you having pieces of loot. I think that may also help. I don't know if you like can trade directly. I wish we would have had the chance to ask that.
Yeah,
but it may reduce that like level.
Well, share loot, so it might as well be trade direct because you know what I'm saying. Is
yeah,
I don't know how it's going to be split up
over like things and be like, oh well, I need this specific weapon or this material and yada. I
think the weather system doesn't sound that dynamic. The weather system definitely sounds, you know, like you said, it's like you get rain and there'll be more rain. It's not like Exoborn where it's like, or tornado could spawn and then it could hit, you know, some fire and then become a fire tornado. Exoborn had a very unique weather system, but it doesn't seem like...
I really like what he said about the lightning. Like the lightning having actual effects if you get hit sounds really cool.
Yeah, lightning will mess you. Well, I mean, weather will mess, or lightning specifically will mess you up. I will say my playtime with it, you don't want to just stand there and get struck by lightning. I think a single lightning strike chewed through my entire shields plus half my health. But you'll see like where it's about to strike. And so you have time to move, but it's like, you got to get out the way. Let me see. What other questions did we not get to, Luke? We didn't talk about Zim, but that was part of the how to deal with cheaters. Doesn't seem like there's no plans for PvE modes, as they mentioned. Just mainly going to be, you know, just the extraction. And that's what, or at least that's what their main focus is. So my PvE players just keep playing Destiny. And then, of course, I think the big one is seasonal wipes. You know, that one sparks a lot of different reactions. There's some people that like wipes because of the reset nature. It's kind of a weird thing because it's like, I don't know, man. Like, remember Diablo when it was first announced that we were going to have seasonal wipes? And I know that's been around for a long, long time, but there were a ton of people that were Destiny players that were playing Diablo that are like, dude, I don't want to wipe. I just worked my ass off to get this gear. Now you're taking it away. Well, of course, they're not taking it away, but you have to start a new account to hit the seasonal content. I actually like in Path of Exile, we just had this wipe here recently for the new content, and I kind of liked it because it was like I started off fresh. I started with one of the new characters, and I will say seasonal wipes. He mentioned a lot of sandbox changes coming per wipe, which is very, very important. I also think that seasonal wipes could be a great opportunity for them to introduce maybe a runner, maybe two runners, you know, because they're going to, I'm assuming, keep adding to this cast. Cross, you don't seem too excited. It's not that I'm not excited. It's just that we just got to play it, man. We just got to play it. And I played it, but I played a pre-alpha build. And I will say I like what Lupo had to say. I love what Andrew had to say just now. And I hope that, you know, the game pops for the community that's becoming the marathon community. I think at the end of the day, I'm still a looter shooter guy. You know, I just love looter shooters. And so I'm completely prepared for this game being a good game, but maybe not my game.
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.